C'est bon, Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending the new session of Ifao Research Seminar. We have the pleasure today to welcome Carmen Gómez Orts. She's an Arabist, philologist. She did a master in translation and is now a PhD candidate at the University of Seville. And she's doing, as it's written in edition, translation, and study of a unicum manuscript called Kitāb Mīzān al-Ṭabīb. And also, like a historical study that is also an investigation on a unicum, so it's a manuscript like known only in one copy. Or maybe that's what we thought. She will tell us, because she recently made new discoveries. So with no further ado, I will give you the floor, Carmen.
Thank you. See, you have to tell me if they are كده? If they can hear me online. Yes. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Adrien, for your presentation. As Adrien has said, I'm going to actually speak about the progress of my thesis during these last 3 years. Okay, thank you. This is the title of my thesis. Originally, it's in Spanish, Edition, Translation, and Study of the Only Preserved Manuscript of the Kitāb Mīzān al-Ṭabīb by Ibn al-Bayṭār, 13th century. My thesis supervisor is Dr. Ana María Cabo from the University of Seville. So the object of my study is the Kitāb Mīzān al-Ṭabīb, which is a manuscript, as Adrien was saying, that it's a unicum, which means that there has only been found a copy of it. As I'm guessing many of you don't know who Ibn al-Bayṭār is, I'm going to give you some brief notes about Ibn al-Bayṭār. He was born in Benalmádena, in the province of Málaga, so Andalus, Spain. As you can see here, the circle at your right is the Iberian Peninsula. I don't know if you noticed that in this map from Al-Idrisi, Africa is represented in the upper part of the map, and Europe is represented in the lower part of the map. So Ibn al-Bayṭār, born in Málaga, he studied with important botanists from Al-Andalus, and he decided to embark himself in a travel through the north of Africa until arriving to Antalya, to the province of, to Turkey, Sham. He stayed there for a while, and he studied with also physicians and botanists, and he used to study all the flora that he would find along his travels until he arrived to the area of Sham. He worked in Egypt for the Ayyubid Sultan al-Malik al-Kamil until he died, and he was appointed as the chief herbalist with this sultan. And I'm mentioning another name here. Ibn Abi Usaybia was a famous physician from Damascus, who is actually known for his most important work, that is actually the only one that has been preserved until today, which is called the عيون الأنباء في طبقات الأطباء. Is an encyclopedical work in which he describes biographies of important physicians of their time. And it happens that Ibn Abi Usaybia was at some point studying with Ibn al-Bayṭār. Ibn al-Bayṭār was his teacher. So they knew each other, and I will come back to this name a bit afterwards. So, the manuscript. Kitāb Mīzān al-Ṭabīb is allocated in the University of Uppsala under the code OVET 58. It is composed by 50 pages, 50 folios. And Ibn al-Bayṭār, in this manuscript, it's divided in 80 chapters, and in each chapter, either one or a pair of illnesses are described. So he explains each of the illnesses, and he gives several treatments for any of these illnesses. He follows an order from head to toes. So all of the illnesses that can happen starting from head through the whole body until the feet. And what is interesting is that each of the recipes is very accurate in the sense that he describes precisely each of the ingredients that must be used to prepare each of the treatments, the way that each sample should be prepared, if it's boiled or pound or grind or broken. So he describes specifically in which way each of the recipes has to be done, each of the treatments has to be done. Also, of course, mentioning the exact quantities or weights that should be used. This is the first folio of the manuscript, and as you can see, it indicates this title, Kitāb Mīzān al-Ṭabīb لابن al-Bayṭār al-Ashab, and a little translation into French. Normally, what we would find is that in the next page, which is this one at your right, normally they would mention again the title of the work as well as the author, commonly. But it was not until my research stay here in the Ifao last year that I realized through the contact and conversations with more people working on manuscripts that if the author and the title don't appear in the first page, it is something sketchy. So I started questioning the things that I used to know about this. And also, it's not dated, which is, well, I mean, it just adds to the suspense, I guess. So, having these new questions, I went back to the catalog of the University of Uppsala to see if I could find more information about the manuscript. I actually couldn't find the manuscript anymore. They had moved it to another catalog. Bueno, at the end, they sent me this page in which the manuscript had just been recently digitized, and I find out that they mentioned 3 people, and if you go to the blue arrow, they also say that the author is given as Ibn al-Bayṭār, but no other source states that he wrote a work with that title. And also that the incipit, which is the introduction of the text, agrees with the Risala Shihabiyya from the author Jamaluddin Muhammad bin Ibrahim al-Mardini. At this point, I was shocked, obviously, because I had been for a year and a half working with a manuscript that was supposed to be a unicum and was supposed to be by Ibn al-Bayṭār. So I had to review all the bibliography, all the studies that used to say that Ibn al-Bayṭār wrote this work in order to reassure about the things that I used to know, right? So what I found out, coming back to the bibliography, is that the modern studies, mostly all of them attribute the Kitāb Mīzān al-Ṭabīb to Ibn al-Bayṭār, so the ones you have in the upper part. Brockelman, my professor, Gillespie, Vernet. And when I went to the sources, I realized that not one source mentioned the Kitāb Mīzān al-Ṭabīb among the works of Ibn al-Bayṭār. So at this point, I was quite sure that something was wrong with the manuscript. I had to look for the information given in the Uppsala page. So I started looking for a Risala Shihabiyya fi Sana'at Tibbiyya, which is the other title that they mentioned, and the new author, Jamaluddin Muhammad bin Ibrahim al-Mardini. I looked in all of the websites for manuscripts that I knew, and also, of course, in the university manuscripts catalogs. And I actually found out that my manuscript was not as unicum as we believed to be. There were several copies, after I analyzed some of them, I realized that indeed it was the same text as the one in the Kitāb Mīzān al-Ṭabīb, but all of these new copies were attributed to the new author and had the new title. So, الرسالة الشهابية and جمال الدين محمد بن إبراهيم المرديني. At this moment, I decided that as I was doing an edition of the Kitāb Mīzān al-Ṭabīb with only one manuscript with which I had been struggling until this moment, because it's actually a manuscript that is it's scarcely punctuated. If you know, the Arabic letters have dots to differentiate each letter from each other. So without the dots, it makes it very difficult sometimes to really know what they are talking about, actually. So as I found myself with a lot of copies, I decided I was only going to choose another 2 more, and I didn't have enough resources to make a stemma of the manuscripts, which would have been interesting, or you know, to see where are each of the copies coming from. But I didn't have the resources to do this, so I just chose the copies that were more available and the copies that were more readable. The copies that I chose are the 2 at your right, Tip Taimur in Cairo and Glaser 160 from Berlin. Actually, in Berlin, there were 2 other copies also available online, but both incomplete. So, now I found myself with 3 copies, and I wanted to do, of course, I wanted to include these 2 new copies to my previous edition. I had 2 options, either to make a paleographical edition for those who don't know anything about manuscripts. I don't know if someone is wondering, but edition is when you take the text written in a manuscript and you represent it back in the computer, so you type it down. So I could have done the paleographical edition, which is to take the text as you see it in the actual manuscript, and every detail, every way of writing that you see, you have to represent it, you have to reflect it in the screen. As I'm saying, the first manuscript I was working with was scarcely marked. There was no diacritical points, so for me there was no point to write down a text that was illegible for anyone who reads Arabic. I wanted to propose a version of the text that would be understandable for anyone who reads Arabic. So what I did was a critical edition. With the critical edition, I can, following certain criteria, I can change the text, more or less. It's not changing, but it's adding things to the text to make it, to make it fit under my criteria, okay? So normally what I would do is this. I have the three images of the texts in front of me. I compare them, and I add whatever difference I find in the other 2 copies, I add it to the first edition that I had. But always signaling it at the footnote. So even if I just write a wow more, I have to signal it in the text. I'm going to show you an example now. And also it's cited at the footnote. Because it's also interesting to see the differences between the manuscripts, of course, and because some of the manuscripts would add information to the first copy that I was working with, and actually it made my job way easier because many of the fragments were not very understandable in the first manuscript. The one that you see at the left is the first one I was working with. So this is how the edition would look. الباب السابع في مدونة العشق. And this is some of the criteria that I have followed. It's not, some of the words are not very clear, I'm sorry. So as I said, I have added the punctuation. I have separated the text in paragraphs to make it fit with the translation. So visually, it would be easily understandable, or easily, it would be more visual. I have removed or changed the alif maqsura, bueno, certain linguistic details. This is what I mean with the... Now you would have the 2 pages one next to each other, the edition and the translation, so you can see the parallel between the two texts. In the edition, I have only added the textual differences of the texts, and in the translation, I have also identified each of the symbols that they use for the treatments, are normally plants and herbs. And I have also written down the transcription of these symbols to make it more identifiable. Yani if you see the word in Arabic, you know that this is the word that I am translating. I wanted to give you a little example of a translation on the cure of love sickness. This is just to connect it with another example I will give you afterwards. I would like you, to see the techniques to know whether someone was suffering from love sickness, and the different treatments that you can follow to cure this poor person. As you can see highlighted, the beloved one can be known by placing the hand on the pulse of the person and mentioning names and attributes. So if the pulse changes, let it be known that this is the one. The treatments are very mild. The communing of the lovers, if it's possible, of course, it's the best option. But if it cannot be achieved in a legal manner, then they should occupy themselves with some intellectual sciences and spend time with people of virtue. So basically, if you cannot do anything about being with your beloved one, you just occupy your mind with whatever you have between hands better. And sleep under the dew and look at the moon, at the full moon. Because it really helps, apparently. Okay, for the translation, maybe this chapter was not one of the most difficult ones, but I sometimes find terms or concepts that I found difficult to translate. Normally, I am all the time working with several other works of the same characteristics. الحوي في الطيب, عيسى بن علي, حنين بن إسحاق, many other works that treat the same, that deal also with medical treatments and with pharmacological recipes. And these are some of the translation challenges that I find. Mostly because, in the case of the weights and measures, because they are obsolete, we don't use them anymore, so sometimes we don't know how to translate them now. Sometimes they used to have a certain measure or weight depending on the area. So at this point, I still didn't know whether my author was Ibn al-Bayṭār or was another one. So this was also contributing to the confusion of how to translate certain terms. Some of the simple drugs, of course, the plants' names are names that have, the phytonymia has changed through centuries and through places. So it takes me a long time to investigate whether they are talking about tarbut abyad or tarbut no sé qué or tarbut ya haga. The compound drugs are even more difficult to find because I don't find sources in which they mention how exactly these compound drugs were made. So sometimes I just have to add a note when I found some of these ones. And I just transcribe the term. And there are other specific concepts. Allah, for example, is a topic that, I would love to hear if any of you has an opinion about this. But whether to translate God or to transcribe Allah, it's already a question I make myself, because we do not have the same conceptions when we are talking about God me at least speaking through from a Christian environment, tradition, even though I have studied Arabic and Islamic studies, but of course I don't have the same conception of the term Allah that someone that has been raised here would have. So this is already a debate, whether to transcribe it or to translate it but add a note, I don't know. And other concepts like ubna, I don't know if any of you Arabic speakers know what ubna means. I'm gonna show you now. Oh, Khosara. The Arabic text is not very readable. I'm really sorry. If anyone is interested, I can show you afterwards. So ubna, if we look at the lexicographical sources, it can be a defect, a fault. It can be passive pederasty, unnatural vice, crime contre nature, defect, passive sodomy, aib. As this work is a work in progress still, I have right now chosen the Spanish translation, sodomia, but it's something that can change through the study. Because I wanted to choose a term, or in order to choose a term, I needed to fully understand what they're talking about in the chapter, in order to know whether it is actually passive pederasty or is it just anal sex in general. From what I understood in the Arabic text, it is the practice of anal sex. Because they also mention the practice of anal sex with a woman. I wish I could show you the Arabic text, but well, I have the translation right now. Yes, so in this sentence that I'm highlighting, it can also occur to those who exceed in copulating with his wife from the buttocks. And it is not safe from having a child suffering from sodomy, or it is not safe for those who have been born with a sodomite character. Sometimes I don't have a clear translation until now. And as you can see, the treatment is much less mild than the one that we have seen for the treatment of love sickness. The treatments against sodomy are beatings, confinement, and humiliation, getting the person into worry and gloom and subjecting him to trials or judgments. Well, apparently eating a grilled heart of a cock prevents from this illness. Also the pigeon heart, for those who like hamama. And 2 dirhams of lion's penis stops this lust, as well as eating garlic. That's more easy to find. So once I've told you about the edition and the translation, I have to tell you about the part that hasn't been as pleasant as the other 2 ones for me. The study of the manuscript's context. At the beginning, I started searching, as you might remember, for this new author, Muhammad bin Ibrahim al-Mardini, and it was very difficult to find any information about him. I have to thank the people working in the library of the Ifao, because they were very kind to help me find some information about him, actually. So the first document I found, well, available on the internet, because I didn't even know when he was, which era he was from, which century he was from, so I couldn't really start looking. But the first document I found out, this medicine in Syria and Egypt, pinpointed me to the thing that has been super important for my research. So in this article, they also mention a Risala Shihabiyya, but they attribute it to some Sibt al-Mardini. Nevertheless, they mention Dr. Yasser Zakkour from the University of Aleppo, and I found this book of him, Istilahat al-Tib al-Qadim. the terminology of the old medicine. And in the book, to my surprise, he says that he has a tahqiq, which means an edition of the Risala Shihabiyya fi Sana'at Tibbiyya, which were the 2 new copies I was working with. I panicked, of course, because I thought, like, how is it possible that someone now has an edition? But thankfully, I found his contact, and I told him about my story, and he very generously agreed to share with me his research on al-Mardini, which has made my work much easier, صراحة. So this is the genealogical tree that Zakur has got to set. Whether I would find a lot of, well, not a lot, but some information on other Mardinis that were not Jamal ad-Din Muhammad bin Ibrahim, I was not able to connect them to each other. I did not know which information was from who. So this helped me a lot with setting that Jamal ad-Din Muhammad bin Ibrahim al-Mardini is actually the grandson of Abdullah bin Khalil, who was a muwaqqit in Mardani Mosque in Cairo, and he had several works on astronomy and architecture. His son, Ibrahim, is the one who inherited the profession of muwaqqit. Muwaqqit, for those who doesn't know, is the person who works in a mosque, studying and setting the times for prayer according to astronomy and mathematical calculations, well, back in the Middle Ages. Jamal ad-Din Muhammad bin Ibrahim al-Mardini has this cousin, Sibt al-Mardini, the one here at the left, who inherited afterwards the muwaqqit profession, and he also has several works on mathematics, astronomy, and horology, which is the study of the hours. So what I want to say with this is that we don't know much about the life of Mardini, but we know that he lived in Egypt, and for a short period of time he also lived in Damascus. And the most important thing is that he was not a physician. As you can see, he was not a physician, but he was coming from a family of well-educated people of science, and people that had actually were actively producing knowledge in science. So this is what he inherited, and he also studied with Sheikh al-Sakhawi, which is an Egyptian historiographer who is one of the few sources that I could find any information on al-Mardini. Now I would like to give you 2 last curiosities about my work. This one is still a question in progress. I still don't know who is Ahmad bin Isa Sahib Halab. In the manuscript that you have in your left, you can see in the margin there's a circle. They have written in the text Ahmad bin Isa Sahib Hali al-Mahrusa, but they have added an addition in the margin, Sahib Hali. It should say Halab. Oh, sorry. Whereas in the manuscript I was working with at the beginning, the Kitāb Mīzān al-Ṭabīb from Uppsala, doesn't mention Sahib Halab. It just mentions Ahmad bin Isa Malik al-Umara, if you see here. In the last copy, they do also mention Ahmad bin Isa Sahib Halab al-Mahrusa. This is the person who commanded the text. This is the person who commanded the text, but I still cannot assess who this person was. Do you remember in the slide I put about the catalog of the University of Uppsala? There were 3 people mentioned there: Ibn al-Bayṭār, al-Mardini, and Fredrik Hasselquist. Fredrik Hasselquist was the owner of the Kitāb Mīzān al-Ṭabīb. And I found out, I don't know if any of you know who Charles Linnaeus is, but he was a pharmacist, he was a botanist, he was a physician, zoologist, and he's considered the father of the scientific binomial nomenclature nowadays. So whenever you have seen this L at the end of the binomial nomenclature, this is owed to Linnaeus. Here I have put a little example of Papaver somniferum, from which we extract the opium that is very used in my manuscript. And the thing is that he has this Voyage and Travels in the Levant that was published by Charles Linnaeus after Friedrich Hasselquist died in Turkey. He was from Uppsala, so the same place that my manuscript is allocated in, but he never came back. In this book, which is, by the way, available online, he explains to his professor, Charles Linnaeus, all of the flora, all of the new flora that he's finding along his trips, and he makes descriptions of the new plants that they didn't know about. He makes drawings of the plants, and he describes everything that he can know to enrich the knowledge when he would come back to Uppsala with his professor, which he never did. But luckily, all of his belongings came back to Uppsala. So this is why I'm guessing at some point he acquired the Kitāb Mīzān al-Ṭabīb with a different title, attributed to a different author, maybe bought in Egypt, I don't know. And he took it with him to Uppsala. So the conclusions are, can we actually state that Al-Mardini was the author of the Ovid 58, Kitāb Mīzān al-Ṭabīb? We have several copies with the name Al-Mardini. According to Zakur, he was not a physician, not a pharmacologist, but he was a very well-versed man. So it can be possible that he had knowledge enough to produce a work of these characteristics. And there are also fragments of the Risala Shihabiyya that have been cited by Al-Azraq in Tasheel al-Manafi fi al-Tibb wal-Hikmah. So I think we have enough arguments to assess that Al-Mardini is the one who wrote the Kitāb Mīzān al-Ṭabīb, which is not the Kitāb Mīzān al-Ṭabīb, is a copy of the Risala al-Shihabiyya. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Carmen.
Thank you.
So I'm going to use my position first to ask you two questions, and then I will open the question to the room.
Yes.
So I want to go back to the manuscripts. So you said you found new copies of the Risala. So can you tell us how many, and also if you have some copies that are dated in the colophons, because you didn't really talk about that, and I'm very curious about that.
Absolutely true. Thank you, Adrian, for your question. Me, myself, I have found around 7 copies, but not all of them were easily available to me. There is one in the University of Cambridge. There are 3, as I mentioned, in Berlin. There is one in Istanbul, which I could have, I purchased it. I purchased a copy. There is one in Tunisia, but I never got access to knowing any more information about it. And I know there's also one in Yemen, but also they never replied to my emails. But I know that 2 of the copies that the 2 copies that I chose, the one from Berlin and the one from Cairo, are both from the 17th century. Okay. The Cairo is the newest one from 1665, and Berlin it's 1605, something like that.
Okay. But the one from Uppsala,
the one from Uppsala doesn't have a date.
But based on the paper, like on the
they believe it's also from the 17th century.
All right.
Yeah.
So my other question was, back to Al-Mardini.
Yes.
So you said that Ibn al-Bayṭār went to the region that is nowadays like the border between Bilad al-Sham and Turkey, right?
Yes.
And the city of Mardin is in this region.
Yes.
So is it possible that he left in the city or the region a work and it was picked up later by some author that just put his name on it?
Absolutely possible. This was also one of my possibilities. The thing is that when I went to the sources and I realized that, for example, one of his disciples and one of the most important biographical sources that we have, which is Ibn Abi Usaybah, doesn't mention the Kitāb Mīzān al-Ṭabīb, at least it's a bit weird. So this is why I'm turning to think that it's actually from Mardini. But yeah, it's a possibility. I am definitely not sure about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So do we have any questions? I think I will go with the microphone now, so people online can hear us.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. I worked in manuscripts. Yes, okay, sorry. I'm sorry, okay. Okay, I can actually use the teacher voice. I'm Egyptian also, I can be very loud. Okay, so I worked in similar manuscripts, but in the context of court records.
Okay.
And I looked at court records. And my question to you about the way the methodology, the way you decided to, for example, break down the text, the original text, into paragraphs, yes, or fixing some of the quote-unquote mistakes, the dots of the ta' marbuta or the alif maksura and all these things. Yes. In my opinion, this is actually where that has been done in Egypt and outside of Egypt. And my own opinion, then, we're actually, when we publish the final edition, if we are going to do that, we should have the original text on the same page. Otherwise, we're basically forcing the reader to actually look at our interpretation of the text. And that's you know, like, we're really, for those of us who do historical linguistics, that's a major problem, because I may reach a different conclusion than what you did. You may do a reading that's different. So this is an issue that we really need to pay attention to when we are publishing manuscripts in the future. So that's one general comment. The second one is, that's a minor thing, is the difference between, should I translate God or should I transliterate Allah? I work in the United States, and usually when we use the word Allah, I notice that we're sending a wrong message, because then what comes to the mind of our students is that they think about, okay, Allah is something different than the, you know, like the God of the three Abrahamic religions. So yes, this is why, and my advice is you can put God/Allah, and then you're, you know, if that's something that you are still, you know, like, debating. You mean to adding both, to add the translation and to also add the transcription? God, you know, that's one solution. I personally use God, you know, and then I say Allah. That's just like to make sure that my message, this is the God of, you know, like, three Abrahamic religion. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Well, answering to your first concern, I totally agree with you, and I understand why you say this, and it's actually being a debate with my professor, also with Dr. Abbas at the beginning of the work with the manuscripts. The thing is that at the end I decided to do the critical edition changing. Yeah, changing. Many people would kill me for, you know, for doing this barbarity to the Middle Arabic. But my idea was, as I have put all of the work into finding, especially at the beginning when I was working with only one copy, it was very difficult to me to discern which is this word, what does this mean. So I had to go through a big
research in order to understand. Then it became better with the other copies. But my point was that if I am just writing the text as I see it, with the paleographical edition, people are not going to understand which is the word I am translating, or why do I choose to translate this if they don't see the same word, for example. I totally get your point, and now my concern is that maybe I have to include the images of at least the Mīzān al-Ṭabīb. Nevertheless, everything is in the footnote. I have noted in the introduction, I explain what's the criteria that I followed to write down the text.
There are other aspects of the text that are actually the gaps over there.
So now you decided to change anything or not in the text, in the Arabic text? Because do you mean that you are doing a critical edition, changing the text? Do you think it's possible?
Not change, I mean, changing the text. I know your idea perfectly, yes. And you know that this was my biggest debate with my professor at the beginning of this thesis. But it's also the justification of my translation, because it's not only the edition what I'm presenting, it's also the translation. So this is the way I justify that this is the word that you see in the translation, is because I have read the text in this way. This is my proposal of edition. But yeah, I don't know if I would work in the same way in the next projects with manuscripts.
I'm very sorry to have been late because I was busy and it was impossible. So sorry, sorry for my for being late. Okay. I think you have the possibility to propose the image of the manuscript and what is not a critical edition, because it will be a kind of interpretation of the text, and you have the right to justify that you are interpreting the text like that and proposing that. And but now, according to the standard, it can't be considered by any editor or scholar as, for me, of course, as a critical edition, because it's in French we say réécriture.
Si. Bien écriture.
But also, I think what is so I'm gonna defend Carmen here, a choice at least, because what is also different is like she's also making a translation, and you have to translate from something. So if you make a translation, you have to translate from something, because if you have a word without dots, if you want to translate it, you have to put dots and make a choice.
Yeah.
But she's just justifying the choice. I mean.
Yeah, this is my point totally.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, yes. I mean, the translation is based on your understanding that you put the text over there for us. But my point is you're limiting. Like if I don't see the image,
I absolutely
agree
with you.
I may reach a different reading.
Yes, yes.
I may reach, based on that, I may come up with a different translation.
I absolutely agree with you. Yes.
You're only proposing the translation for your PhD. It's not an
No, it's also the edition.
As well.
Yes.
And but we can take the opinion, have the opinion of our colleague or scholar specialized in
someone working in manuscripts,
or I don't know who is an editor of text, for instance, pharaonic text or not. Nobody.
May I add something? I'm sorry. Yes.
No, because you had a question.
No, but if I may weigh in the discussion.
Please, Angela.
No, I mean in the translations also of treatises about weights and measures, it's usually you can find easily like not the translation but only the transliteration of the Arabic word in the text. Sorry, I could not hear the whole conversation, but I think I gathered that what I think, and my point of view, is that creating a translation and an edition is ultimately creating an infrastructure for scholarship. So what you actually want to do maybe is just leaving as it is the words, because ultimately you're not creating like a manual that modern day pharmacists are gonna use, right? So they don't need to wait in nowadays. Hopefully, I mean, they're not gonna.
I mean, hopefully we find some useful information. But
way.
yeah.
So I mean, maybe it's not that urgent to translate with kilos and grams, and you can leave irdab and ratl and mitzkal, I think.
The thing is that I wouldn't translate the weight, but I would make a footnote explaining how much it used to be in that moment, so we have a reference. Because if I just put mithqal, you don't know how much is a mithqal. So I would transcribe. If there's not a word, I would transcribe it. Normally, actually, there are translations also for these terms. But if I don't find it, I just transcribe the term and add a footnote explaining a little glossa explaining.
Yeah. Sorry, but that was not my question, however. Okay. My question was, so at the end of the conclusion, if I understand correctly, the Kitāb Mīzān al-Ṭabīb doesn't actually exist. Or does it exist, but we don't know where is it?
No, I mean, well, only the modern sources mention Kitāb Mīzān al-Ṭabīb because Brockelmann, in his catalog, says there is this manuscript called Kitāb Mīzān al-Ṭabīb in Uppsala, and it belongs to Ibn al-Bayṭār. But then when you go to the sources, and many studies, many modern studies repeat the same information because they are not going to check if the manuscript is actually from Ibn al-Bayṭār or not. They just trust the work of Brockelmann or Gillespie or whoever, and they repeat the information. But the thing is that the text contained in the manuscript is the same as the Risala Shihabiyya. And for the Risala Shihabiyya, we do have a lot of copies.
Yeah, exactly. But then the point is, like, do you have any idea where the misunderstanding about the title and the author come from?
No. I have no idea. Because all of the bibliography that cites the Mīzān al-Ṭabīb are based in this information, just catalogal information about the text. I haven't found it mentioned in any other place so far. And I want to say that Ibn al-Bayṭār was a very renowned physician and pharmacist, and he has been cited by other Arab scholars. And his works are known because are also cited in many other places. And it's weird that we know about the Kitāb al-Mughni and we know about the Kitāb al-Jama', but we don't know about Mīzān al-Ṭabīb from the sources. Yeah.
And sorry, one last question. Would the history of this manuscript and how it became like property of Uppsala give some hint on like what happened in between?
The only thing that I know is that the manuscript itself belonged to Frederick Hasselquist. I don't know exactly when this collection came to Uppsala. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Do you have any idea why you have like a French translation of the title on the first page?
Neither. No. There's also a French translation, Angela, in the first page of the manuscript of Uppsala. Remember?
Yeah, that's
it's also translated into French. So.
Yeah, maybe
why?
It was in the possession of some French at some point.
Sorry. The stamp is from the University of Uppsala, I think. Yeah.
Just as a follow-up, I think it's interesting if you're able to go to the catalog of, the archive of the university.
Yes.
So it's not really the study, like we were just saying, the study of the manuscript itself, but of the modern history of this manuscript that might also shed some light on this confusion.
Yes. I have it in my checklist. Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Dina. Yes.
Questions?
Any questions?
Okay. So, I mean, if we look at the image that you're sharing with us, we'll see some, there are an empty space, big empty space, and there are some words that are written in bold, and some are in red color. These are actually not here, but in other manuscripts.
In the other copies, yes.
Yeah. And these are actually, if you pay attention, if we really pay close attention to that,
yes.
These are indications of punctuation, for example, or they wanted to highlight some stuff. So from what I saw, you can use that You know, like if it's starting, I believe the word in bold over there, I think it's al-Bab. Yeah, it's al-Bab. So, okay, so that might be a new chapter, for example, or
it is.
setting, yeah.
Yes.
So this would be an indication for you if you're doing a paragraphing, if we want to. However, I would still leave the line the same as it is. You know, like if you doing that.
You would reflect the text just followed as it is, or you would edit page per page.
I will edit page per page, but keep the same. Basically, I won't break the text and leave the space if I wanted to. Still adding the dots, the hamza, the alif maksura, the ta marbuta, all these things.
I see.
But again, I am like creating an edition in the Arabic version of what I am writing as close as possible to the original.
As the image, yes. Okay, thank you. Yes.
Do you have any other questions or remarks? You good? Okay. All right. Well, thank you for coming. And
thank you.
Thank you, Carmen,
Thanks to all of you.
for this very interesting presentation. And we hope to see you all very soon for our next session. It will be announced in the coming weeks, I suppose.
Thank you, Adrien.
So yeah.